I'd like to call to order the June meeting of the Harwich Golf Committee. And today being Tuesday, June 16th, as advertised on our agenda, the following statement is in accordance with state recommendations for televised meetings under this COVID dilemma that we find ourselves in. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, the order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Harwich Golf Committee on June 16th, 2020 at 4 o'clock, lasting to approximately 6, will be conducted via remote to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found in the Town of Harwich website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner on channel 18 or by watching the simulcast at http://Harwich18, etc. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we're unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Harwich website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome Roman Greer, our Director of Golf, and Ed McManus, liaison to the Harwich Golf Committee, has been invited, as yet is not present. So according to the agenda, and I talked to Roman earlier today, he has a director's report that's going to emphasize a couple of very positive things that have developed. So, Roman, I'm going to turn that over to you before we get into the old business. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Clem. So, yeah, I didn't prepare a ton for a director's report just because everything that we've been working on, I mean, it's been all COVID response all the time for the most part. But there are a few items to discuss. First, if I can, I want to publicly recognize the golf staff for all they've done in adapting to all these changes we've gone through. This has been a challenge of a season, and our golf staff have been exemplary in every regard. I think our support from the town administrator, the other town departments like the finance director, the health director, have been wonderful. So it's been a real team effort. So I really want to start off by saying we've had great teamwork in getting to where we are right now. And you know, it's been pointed out a lot by our customers and our members that we have not been the first to reopen our driving ranges and our, adapt. So I really feel like we're possibly the most responsible. I think we're really following the state guidance, and we're doing it in a very responsible way. And I think that's really something to commend our staff for, is their buy-in to what we're trying to accomplish. So thanks for bearing with me on that. Moving on to the final page of your packet, I just wanted to mention the Mass Golf event. That's the first event we're going to hold for this season. It's still on. It's been adapted a little bit. You'll see on I included the letter that went out to all the participants. It's basically a limited field because they dropped all the qualifying events. So it's the good news for our members and our playing public at Cranberry Valley. It's going to be a lower impact on the golf course. Instead of having the third and fourth completely closed, we're going to get the golf course back and able to have tee time at about 1 o'clock those days, because instead of playing 2 rounds to qualify, all participants are only going to be required to play 1 qualifying round on either the Monday or the Tuesday. But it's very exciting. This is one of the Mass Golf majors of the year, the Mass Golf junior major. And we've been expecting to have this at Cranberry Valley for years now. So it's exciting news that that tournament is on. As we get a little closer to the date, I'll start looking for volunteers from our members who have shown a lot of enthusiasm for supporting events like this in the past.
Roman?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to interject that, people. Keep this in mind. I think it's a perfect opportunity, Martha and or Jack, to involve volunteers as needed by Roman. So, perhaps you could reach out to your groups and float that idea. I think it's a wonderful way to, promote participation and have a better understanding of what the benefit of this type of a championship is to the Harwich community. It's a great public relations, I think, vehicle. So, Martha or Jack, I just, would give you a heads up on that if it's possible, or to your liking.
Hey, Clem, just so I can say it publicly, we've had so many mass golf events. Our golf course is really pretty associated with mass golf and the events they hold because we've held so many. We always have a great turnout of member support. So, we had, I think, 20 to 30 ladies ready to volunteer last year for the mass junior girls. I don't think it's funny when I talk to the officials at mass golf that run the event. They kind of chuckle at how many of our members volunteer and how it's just not a problem whatsoever to find volunteers. So I'll work with Jack and I'll work through Janet with the Ladies Association to spread the word. I'm sure we'll come up with what's needed.
Okay. One thing that comes to mind, Roman, of course, is always an important item: food. It's common sense, but will you be working with Ron Leidner in the hot stove as far as, what those possibilities might be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll connect Kevin Eldridge from the Mass Golf that's going to run the event with Ron. And the world we're in right now, we've got to see, are we in phase 3? Have our operations had a chance to expand? Either way, we'll do our best to accommodate the golfers and their families and everybody that's on property for those days.
John, I saw your microphone on. John Crook, any comments?
Well, we had our first mass golf event yesterday. So things are off and running right now. And obviously, August 3rd is still quite a ways off. So, I'm sure we'll be in good shape for that. I think the only thing that we have to do in preparation for the tournament, as we talked about the other day, is a few things on the course that we might have to add, particularly out of bounds stakes. And I think the stakes that we have now don't look like out of bounds stakes. They look like property stakes. And I think for the championship, we're going to have to change those.
Yeah, that's a good point. Roman, what he's referencing are those tall, and people, you're out on the course playing, you've probably seen them. The traditional white stake, I think it's even a particular to a regulation, Roman, that those were absent as far as we could see. So,
okay. I'll just take a look. But Clem, just so you know, our procedure for having these events is we'll have somebody from Mass Golf come down, drive the golf course, check on the markings, fix anything that they would like to fix. So, it's not, I don't always consider it our responsibility. They'll come down and work with our team to get the course marked as well as possible. And because Mass Golf does hold so many events at Cranberry Valley, they're very in tune with what's going on there. So we'll have it tuned up exactly the way they want it.
Okay, cool. Great.
Well, Roman, I'm one of those guys that does that. So I just wanted to make sure that and I know we do all the work, but do we have stakes available?
Yeah, I'll talk to you, John. All right, so John, you've been assigned to the event?
Well, yes, I'm head of the championship committee, so I'm involved with every event.
Good, yeah. So I'm sure we do. So if you want to talk another time, then now we'll work on having all the supplies needed.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let me keep going down the list here. I've got a brief list. So PGA Junior League, We've decided to. I have been in touch with the New England PGA, and it's really a different season according to all the rules they've put on things and trying to roll out the PGA Junior League. We're deciding to postpone our involvement in that until next season. And our recommendation is we're going to transfer the few registrants we've had for the Cranberry Valley program over to our co-partners in PGA Junior League in Harwich, the Harwich Port program. And so the DAG program continues strong, and we would offer them access to our range. What I was proposing, and I was going to ask for an endorsement from the committee on, is because it's going to be really hard to fit all of our junior programs in, a really limited access golf course at this point. I was hoping to offer a junior range night on Tuesdays and Thursdays after 4 o'clock. Just invite any junior golfers in the community to come out and hit balls for free, use our practice facility for free. And in accordance with that, we'd also invite the Harwich Port PGA Junior League teams to come out and utilize the practice facility since they don't have a big driving range. Let me know your thoughts on that. How you feel about it, offering junior range nights on Tuesdays and Thursdays this summer?
Roman, I think it's a great idea. It's kind of a trade-off, but I guess I would also would encourage the presence of an adult in kind of a supervisory capacity. I mean, if a kid's 18, he's 18. That's not required, but maybe it's appropriate under the age of 10 if you had a junior golfer. What's your thought? I'm not trying to make it complicated.
No, you're right on, Clem. I think, when we announce it, we'll announce to say that, we'll pick an age, and I'd say maybe 12 and under should have a parent or guardian. It's very common that we have young golfers on our driving range all the time. But if some parents or families choose to make this the opportunity where they want to start somebody golfing or go out and try golfing for the first time, it would be appropriate to have not to be a drop-off situation, but to have a parent or guardian. So if you endorse the idea, I would put together an announcement that I would announce it to our membership and the community, and we would put together some language to suggest parents or guardians for 12 and under.
Okay. What's the downside? What's the downside?
Oh, well, the downside to canceling the PGA Junior League season, momentum with that program, it's really the program they're rolling out is very limited this year, where they're forcing the parents to be there to walk along. That is normally a drop-off situation. And when I've talked to the parents, they're not happy with what the PGA is offering this year and making all parents walk along and all the social distancing. The program, they wear the Little League shirts. It's supposed to encourage high fives. They're not allowed to high five. They're not allowed to, they have to stay socially distant. We think it would be a real downer of a year for the program. And then with the current limitations on our tee times, it would be basically giving away comp tee times, which, for juniors, you've got to do that type of thing. But with the pressure on our tee sheet currently, we just didn't feel it was appropriate to block tee times for the program. So I think we're going to try to handle it by Harwich Port has shown that they have a lot of extra space down there. They may be better equipped to handle it this year. They've been our partners in the program, so they'd appreciate us sending them our registrants where they could handle them for this year if we'd allow them a little practice access. And then we try to bring the program back in full next year.
Excuse me, the order of speakers that I saw, so that we can stay organized. I saw Steve first, then John Crook, and then Martha. Your mics are on, so Steve?
I certainly do, in theory, like this idea of the free use of the range, Roman. But could we make it tentative or whatever until we reduce the social distancing needs? Because there's been a backlog at the range. I was at the range today, and there were people waiting for the opportunity, obviously, because we're far more limited with the number of people that can be on the range at the same time. There were people waiting in line, and I don't want to frustrate the people that use our range or our range members any more than they've already been frustrated. Hopefully by then, knock on wood, we won't have that limited number of range bays, if you want to call it that, and then I would wholly endorse it, getting the young people. But I would hate to make it even harder for paying customers, particularly those that have range memberships, to have to wait further in line because the range is virtually closed with young people if we're still in that mode.
Sure, good point. I guess I could separate a few ideas. If we offered the driving range to the Harwich Fort PGA Junior League on the Tuesdays and Thursdays, what I've done in the past, I could coordinate with Bob Miller and I'll offer them the mat in the teaching area where it doesn't take away any spots from any of our customers. So that'd be good for the PGA Junior League kids, and then we could wait to offer the general public once we have more space. That's a good idea.
Okay, John Crook.
Yeah, I endorse the concept completely, so I think it's a good idea.
Martha?
I just want to, I was going to say exactly what Steve said. So thank you.
And Roman, one thought I would have too as well from a management perspective, I would think that you would want to have someone on staff touching base with the range, as these young people access it. Not to supervise every minute, but at least touching base to go down there and make sure that, to Steve's point, everything is kind of copacetic and staying organized.
Sure, absolutely, Clem. So, if you separate the populations, the PGA Junior League kids, they'll have coaches, and we'll put them on the other side of the fence in the private instruction area. We've run events on the driving range free to kids in the past. You think there's this huge mass that's going to come out, and usually it's a few grandparents with a few grandkids, and it doesn't really open the floodgates. There's not usually a huge response. But if we did schedule it, we'd make sure we had some attendance down there to help keep some order.
Okay, perfect. I would, if we're in agreement, people, I'd entertain a motion to allow junior access to the range and leave the particulars up to Roman. Roman, you can draft the statement, but we're endorsing the concept. If that's appropriate, John Wheeler?
Second.
Seconded by Martha Duffy. And it's the protocol that I have to adhere to. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to call a vote. And by technical protocols, the state has set any vote that we take has to be done by roll call. So I'll announce your name. I know it's a bit formal, but I'm sorry. It's the way it has to be. So is there any more discussion?
What are the dates of this, Clem, again?
Roman?
So it was going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, starting with the last week of the PGA Junior League starts the last week of June. So just as we discussed, I'll offer it to the PGA Junior League kids from the Harwich program, based on them using Bob Miller's areas to begin with, and then we'll announce it to the general public once we hit the next phase and can release some access or give some more access to the driving range.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, motion on the table. It's been seconded. John Wheeler.
Yay.
Jack Conley.
Yes.
John Crook.
Yes.
Steve Bellata.
Yes.
And Martha Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, motion is passed. It's unanimous. Thank you, Roman.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll just buzz through a few last items here. The first tee program, which was supposed to have a nice public rollout this summer. Once again, I've been in touch with Mass Golf and Kyle that runs the first tee for Mass Golf. We've decided to pause this summer once again and roll out the same program we had last fall and spring to just the Monomoy program for first tee. And once again, announce a public program for summer of 2021. At this point, he just didn't have the resources to expand, and he didn't think it was appropriate under the restrictions we currently have. So first tee will not be going on this summer. It's going to be Monomoy middle school and high school programs only in fall and spring of this year, and it'll open to the general public in 2021 summer. And then my next thing, one thing I wanted to get the committee's ideas on was our leasees, the Hot Stove and Miller Golf. They're both in the final years of their contract. They're obviously having very difficult seasons. Miller Golf in particular, they just gave their first golf lessons this past Saturday, and it really doesn't seem appropriate that they would have to pay their full rent for the year. The Hot Stove is taking a daily loss. I mean, there's just, I'm in daily conversations with Ron. Everything he's doing is a loss at this point. It's just the losses are racking up. We'd love to engage these groups in the future. Miller Golf has told me that they would sign a 3-year extension right now if they were offered one. They love Cranberry Valley. They're doing a great job in my eyes for what they offer. Same with Hot Stove. They've been wonderful. I wanted to get the committee's ideas on, and I'm not really sure exactly how we would go about doing this, but consider reduced rent payments for this season based on their inability to make income and revenues. And what we should do if it's a waiver of rent. I mean, they've both been great leasees, and they're both taking it pretty hard this season. So I know that the previous town administrator last fall waived Ron's second rent payment based on his losses in the tornado, and he was required to document, his tax information that, when he seeks relief. But I know the town administrator last fall did relieve him of that second lease payment. So there is a precedent there. Let me get your thoughts, though, on what you think regarding our leasees.
Okay, John Wheeler.
You just hit the question I was going to ask, Roman, and that dealt with this notion of what has the town ever done this before? And you said the precedent has occurred. So I want to keep Hot Stove. I want to keep Bob Miller. So whatever we can do to help them out.
Jack Conley.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Roman, is it like half of the payments? Half? Is that what it is?
So this year for the Hot Stove, their rent is $10,000, and so last year it was $12,000. The second payment, as far as Hot Stove goes, it's 2 installments. So their second installment of $6,000 was waived based on the tornado damage. To this point, the Hot Stove has paid no rent based on their inability to get open and to generate any revenue. And at this point, Miller Golf, the same thing. They have not. They usually pay monthly over 6 months of payments, and they've paid nothing based on the fact that they have not been allowed access up to this point.
Yeah, I think they're both a great asset. So I would think anything we can do to keep them or assist them would be great.
Steve Bellotto.
I would absolutely agree with you, Roman, and support Bob Miller. I'm not a fan of the Hot Stove. I don't think he does much. I don't think he does a very good job at all. And I would not support any lease relief for Hot Stove.
John Crook.
I think it's a good idea. I think the logical start to me would be that somehow if they have a 6-month lease or whatever the case is, they're paying rent for 6 months to, as they go in position, to prorate it over the number of months that they're going to be active. So, I mean, if they've already lost 2 months or 3 months, I'd give them, I'd prorate their rent or their lease by those 3 months that they were inactive.
Good point, John. I endorse that. Martha?
Yes, I support both of them, but I was also wondering, Roman, what is the club's loss going to be this year because of the virus and the lateness of opening up the course and the club? I don't think I don't have a handle on that at all, and I'm being asked. And so what are you perceiving will our loss be in revenue?
Yeah, so so I can give some very broad numbers. Basically, so we're probably last time I checked, we were $300,000 to $400,000 in the red, or $300,000 to $400,000 below where we normally are at this point in the fiscal year, which is right near the end of it. But that being said, the essential spending guidelines the town has put on us, we've saved some money by being forced to really tighten our purse. So I'd say it's probably going to be closer to $200,000 down. The membership numbers are actually very strong. Carol Capola, the town's finance director, presented that to the selectmen last night, and I just ran a report this morning. We're at about 95% of the memberships where we were at the exact time last year. The memberships have been strong. It's all related to the tornado last year, the 10 days we lost there, and the kind of slow comeback we had, and then missing April and May of this year for the most part. And then just being limited up till this Friday was the first time we reintroduced non-member play for on a regular basis. So those numbers will settle, and I'll be able to give you at the next golf committee meeting the end of fiscal year numbers as they stand. But it's going to be a few $100,000 down.
Martha, that was a very important question. I'm glad you asked it. Regarding the topic at hand, I'd entertain a motion based on the conversation that we prorate an adjustment to both vendors, Bob Miller Golf and the hot stove, based on the calendar year of what they pay for their leases. So with a reduction to be in hand.
I think we need some discussion on that. Come.
Okay. Well, do we want to put forward a motion and then we can just discuss it? Okay. Would someone make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, so moved by John Crook, seconded by Martha Duffy. So discussion, John?
I think the discussion would be, and Roman would have to give us some insight into this, if we prorated it, which seems to be a logical way to do it, would that be amendable to them in terms of going forward and establishing a long-term relationship with them?
Yeah, so Bob Miller has reached out to me, and he wanted to see if the town would consider a per lesson rate, where he'd pay the town a % of each lesson he gives, because he thinks he's so far behind at this point. As far as hot stove goes, I know that they're losing money every day until they're able to get further open. So, maybe it may be a good idea. Again, I'm just having ideas here. Maybe we want to invite Bob Miller and Ron to the next golf committee meeting and discuss with them, what they would like to see and what would be helpful for them to make it through the season as well as possible.
Roman, how do we pay Bob Miller now? Is it like a $5,000 rate for the year?
It's an odd number right now, John, because his first year of his 5-year lease was $5,000, and then it goes up at 5% every year after. So it's then going up 5% each year. So it's about $5,500 or so. And he pays it in 6 monthly installments, so it's about it's under $1,000 a month. And he's already missed April. I'm sorry, I think May and June's. He's missed April and May's payment so far.
Okay, John Wheeler.
Roman, did I hear you right? You were suggesting that perhaps Ron and Bob could attend our next meeting, and then based upon that, we would take a position relative to this issue? Did I hear you right?
That was just an idea I had. I want to get you the committee's ideas on that. If I'd hate for us to discuss something without them possibly. If you wanted to get their ideas on what would be helpful to them, or what they could afford at this point, or what would help them have a successful season, it's probably worth engaging them either at the golf committee level, or maybe we have a private meeting with them before the next meeting, and then report back at the next meeting, what was discussed. I have not had very detailed discussions with them. I talk to Ron every day, and I know where he stands. And Bob Miller has asked for relief, and but he said in asking for relief, he's signed up right now for a 3-year extension.
Roman, based on the conversation, people at this time deferring to Roman, John, we could table the motion. It's on the table, and then consider the motion at our next meeting. Under the umbrella of financial assistance due to the hardship created by this COVID event. John Wheeler.
I'm just concerned with time here. Everything travels too slow already, okay? And to wait another month, now we're in the middle of July. And I would think we could resolve this before the middle of July with these folks. So is there a plan B? Maybe it's behind it. Take that back. It's a private conversation. We get a sense of the landscape, and then from there, for us to be able to better take a position on this.
Martha?
Clem, I just had 2 things I wanted to bring up. Number one, how is Bob Miller promoting his program? I mean, I don't hear much about it. And number 2, going back to subsidizing Ron and Bob, Roman, you certainly work with the numbers, the issues at hand. What would your recommendation be so that possibly we might be able to make a decision tonight?
Okay, based on my casual conversations with each of them, I think it's Bob Miller, to answer your question, he does a lot of online marketing. Once you've taken a lesson with him or get into his database, he's got a really good reach online. Other than that,
that's not enough. I don't get them, and I've taken lessons from him.
John Crook?
Okay. So to follow up on the ideas, though, I think that I think that the hot stove is probably looking at a lost year. And I think Bob Miller, if he had to pay his full rent, would be looking at, working his tail off to hope to break even. So his idea of, I have great trust with Bob Miller. I think his idea of a % per lesson is a good idea. If it was going to be a prorated rent, I think it's probably a pretty good idea. He's told me that he's not seeing the demand for full 1-hour lessons at all, and he doesn't see that coming. So he's going to try to roll out an entirely different program than he's done in the past, which is going to include a lot more clinics instead of one-on-one lessons, because he thinks that people are going to be a little tighter with their money this year. And he doesn't see as many people paying $100 for an hour lesson. He thinks that he's going to do a lot more $25 a person clinics. And so it's hard to judge. I think the fact that he gave his first lesson last Saturday, it'll probably start coming clear to him. And then I think the same thing. I get what you were saying, John, about the timing. I think we'll get a better sense once they get a chance to get rolling a little bit, though, because they're really just getting rolling. And the hot stove is so limited right now with just the limited seating on the outside, and Bob Miller just getting started. It may not be too something we have to rush. It may be worth not putting pressure on them to get their immediate rent payments in, but letting them know that we'd like to discuss with them what would be appropriate.
Jack Conley.
Yeah, Roman, there's another operation in town, I guess it's called Dockside. Do you know what their status is relative? Is the town doing anything relative to them? Because they're in a similar situation. I don't know whether if we take action, then it's gonna set a precedent for that environment.
Yeah, great idea, Jack. I don't know, but I can reach out to the harbor master and see. I know the harbor has been open a lot longer than we have, and they're more of a grab-and-go type operation than a sit-down restaurant. But that's a great idea, so I think there should be some consistency probably. Let me reach out to the harbor master and see if there's anything going on there.
John Crook?
I think waiting until the next meeting to invite the hot stove and Bob Miller in is not a good idea. I think basically we should give Roman some guidelines that we feel right now and let him negotiate it. And I think my going position would be, they've already lost April and May, basically. They're going to lose for the most part June. So maybe what we do is, as a going position, you know, we cut their rent 50%, or Roman comes up with some other idea, like with Bob Miller, with the percentage of the lessons, whatever the case may be. But I think our step today should be to give Roman some rope in terms of negotiating what he feels is best for those two vendors.
Okay, we can incorporate that as part of the motion. John?
The other thing, Clem, who would be responsible for making that decision? Roman, are you responsible for that, or does it have to go to town hall?
In the fall, when I brought up the subject at Ron's behest for relief from the tornado, it came from the town administrator. The town administrator had to make that call. He negotiated the lease in the first place, and so he had to make the call. But I think it would go a long way to say the committee endorses an idea. That'd be a good way to bring it to the town administrator to say, I endorse and the committee endorses this idea.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Well,
Steve?
could we separate the two? Separate motion on Bob Miller and a separate motion on hot stove.
I think because, not that they're equal in stature, but I think collectively, Roman, you'd probably want to keep them together since they are the only two leasees that we have.
Okay.
Roman?
Yes, that sounds right. I mean, I think we should give them each equal thought.
Anyone else? Jack Conley? John Crook?
I think we should do them both.
Yeah. Okay. Without further.
I think if it looks like Steve feels very hot about the hot stoves for some reason. So I don't know. I think it's been a difficult year for both restaurants or any type of small business. So I think we have to kind of treat them equally in this situation.
Agreed.
That's my personal feeling.
Okay, motion on the table.
I just think the circumstances are different. I think part of Ron's problem is Ron's problem, and Bob's problem was wholly based on the restrictions and the guidelines given by the state around the service that he provides. And Ron could have dealt with the guidelines for his services in a very different manner and put himself deeper into the hole. So that's why I support Bob Miller and I don't Ron. But so be it. I will yield to the majority.
I believe we're ready for a vote. On the motion, as proposed by John Crook and seconded by Martha, correct?
Is this motion going to be for both the hot stove and Bob Miller together?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And that the key point is that Roman has the flexibility to negotiate whatever he deems to be appropriate in the treatment of each vendor.
Correct.
John Wheeler.
So those are the words in the motion that we're voting on?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So, John Wheeler.
Yes.
Jack Conley.
Yes.
John Crook.
Yes.
Steve Bellata.
No.
And Martha Duffy.
Yes.
Okay. It's a 4-1 vote. And the motion is passed. So, Roman, you've got a green light to engage those gentlemen. And, as soon as possible, perhaps you could keep the committee in the loop as far as what the disposition is. John Wheeler?
Just a question of protocol here. You mentioned his vote was 4-1. There are 6 of us on this call. So what's your vote, Clint?
My vote would be positive.
Thank you.
Yes.
So it's 5-1. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks,
So,
John.
Clint, my idea will be to engage each of them and come up with a recommendation that I'll send to the committees or my recommendation, and if the committee endorses it, I'll send it along to the town administrator.
Okay, great.
And then one final thing before we move on, let me see if I can share a screen, because I said that there was some exciting news on memberships. Let me know if you can see this spreadsheet, please.
We can see the spreadsheet, Roman.
Okay, so this is a very rudimentary report, I know, but this shows membership from 2019 to 2020 on June 15th, and it's really exciting news to show that we're at 1,016 members right now. We were at 1,053 at this point last year. We were expecting to be at about 3/4 membership. We're at more like 95% of our members. You'll see, I'm just starting to digest these, but a lot of Harwich renewals are well down, but new Harwich memberships are way up. So that's very exciting. And then if you look all the way to the right, our new collegiate category that we just created this year has 33 members. So that's wonderful to see as well. Young adults are up on the year. Juniors are about even. So some very good numbers. I'm very encouraged by them, and it feels like it. We've been really, really busy teaching new members how to use the system and engaging new members. And I think the COVID crisis has driven some people to golf. That people want to go out and do something that's outdoors and healthy and safe. So very encouraging numbers. And once again, this was promoted by the finance director to the selectmen last night, saying golf is exceeding expectations in membership. So very positive.
Roman, I think it's great news, and it's just a thought. At some point in time, I realize there's a lot of pressure on the system as it is right now in terms of getting tee times, access to the range. If possible, I think it'd be great if we put some kind of a good news public relations effort out there just to let people know things are going to get better. So I don't know if you wanted to. I think something like that would be appropriate, because I know you've got the capacity to send it out to the members through your electronic communication, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, Clem. I'll be sure to do that. Things have really, we had a lot of frustrated people, and again, I don't want to get ahead of things on the agenda, but we've had a lot of frustrated members just at the fact that when you have the 15-minute separation in tee times, you're getting 16 golfers on the golf course an hour. That's it. That's straight math. And when you have 1,000 members and you can only have 16 on the course an hour, that math doesn't add up. And so I think the committee was really helpful in endorsing it and correct in endorsing my idea last month of it being a members only golf course until that changed. This past Friday, when we entered phase 2 and we went to 12-minute separation and we went to expanded hours where we're basically open all sunlight hours right now, I think that really eased up at the golf course. I monitor the tee sheets every day. The tee sheets during this week we're in right now have every morning when we send out the tee times, there's open spots on the tee sheet. So pressure has been alleviated. I know the 12-minute separation we're currently under is still, a far cry from our normal 8-minute tee time. So, but every day, we have 270 tee times. And even last year, when we were running 8-minute tee times, the members played about 170 rounds on a busy day, 180 rounds. Currently, the members have 170 tee times. So the members have about the amount of tee times that they've always had in the past. Currently, with the place where we're missing the public pay tee times. But as of last Friday, 30% of the 18-hole tee times, or 3 hours a day, is for sale now. So we're starting to generate the revenue again. But there's definitely an easing of the pressure on the tee sheet as of last Friday, and it's easy to see at the golf course.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Jack Conley.
Yeah, Roman, I would certainly encourage you sending something out because I still think there's a lot of frustration about, you go on the excess list on Chelsea. I just relate my own experiences. I play a lot, but I'm on there like twice a week. So I know people are somewhat frustrated that they can't get the tee times that they'd like. But I think, if you can some of this data, that would help hopefully assuage some of the aggravation that's out there.
I was on it 4 times in 1 week.
You've got the time.
On it twice.
Not played a weekend.
John Wheeler?
I just want to say I was on it twice, and I've had someone else come up walk up to me and says, "How come I can't get tee times?" Because on Monday and also this Friday on overflow. That's the new phrase, overflow. Everybody's talking overflow, and it's not a pleasant conversation. So I don't know. I mean, we got to explain it to people. So.
John Crook?
Yeah,
I think the big thing here is that really we have nothing to do with it. It's all about Charlie Baker and what he's going to do in the next phase. And if hopefully on the June 29th, we're going to see a reduction in tee time intervals again. And hopefully that's going to solve some of the problems. It's going to go hopefully to at least 10 minutes. And hopefully some of the driving range restrictions are going to be lifted as well. So I think a lot of it's going to depend in the next couple of weeks in terms of what happens.
John, I agree with you, but I think I think people are more focused on what's the impact on me, and I think John Wheeler mentioned he was on it twice. Martha mentioned she was on it 4 times. That's a lot. So it's really the government or the state's restrictions that are impacting that. But the people relate, I can't get a tee time when I want. And this has really been the first experience that they've had, or at least as bad as it is. And usually you would only struggle to get tee times on the weekend. Now it's definitely during the week.
Yeah.
Okay, the order of speakers, I've got Steve and Martha and then John Wheeler again. Steve?
I think sending an update is fine. I think, Roman, you've been doing a great job with the updates as is. I mean, certainly whenever the state guidelines change, you've been very good about communicating that. I understand people's frustrations about the tee times, and I don't know if marketing is going to help that until we have new guidelines, to John Crook's point. And I certainly, again, understand the frustrations, but to be perfectly frank, it should be expected. And it should come as no surprise to any members that because we're under severe restrictions in terms of initially the hours that the course could be open, which has changed, but even still with the 12-minute time limit. I mean, if people are getting frustrated with the golf operations because we have a 50% increase in the time between tee times, shame on them. I mean, it's just pretty logical to assume that that's going to put a crimp on the number of available slots, which is going to make it more difficult to get tee times. It is what it is, and it's got nothing to do with how the golf course is being operated, other than following the state guidelines.
Okay. Martha?
I'm fine, Clint. Thank you.
Okay. John Wheeler again.
Steve, good points right on. Okay, but I do think I don't know, Roman, you can tell us as you analyze the request for tee times. There are got to be pockets of times, okay, when the demand for those tee times is lower. For example, I know somebody who got overflow on Monday and then went off like at six something, and they got a tee time. And it may be a late afternoon thing as well. So if there's any insights to try and distribute the requests across the open horizon, if you will, while acknowledging, okay, that we're doing the best we can given the state's guidelines, I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, I think, John, I've never analyzed the T-sheet as closely as I do. I really give it a good daily analysis to see what's going on. And if anything, I get really good confidence in the fact that the Chelsea system is really working well. There's a few demographics that it's not doing well with, and that's singles. We've always had a problem with singles. Which is a pretty large group at our golf course. Chelsea handles singles in two ways: pair them up before placement, or fill them into spots after placement. Over the years, we've done both, and that's the only options. And it really does not work. Neither option really works well. What we're currently doing is it pairs singles before placement. And so, it takes the pool of singles, pairs them all up, pairs them with twosomes, pairs them with threes, and then gives them a tee time. The problem is, and this infuriates people, and this is just a Chelsea issue, this is what they offer us. If, say, four of the committee members all put in a singles and you were paired up together, it would randomly select one of you as the captain of the tee time, and so it would defer that entire tee time to that one person's random request of how many holes, if it's 9 holes or 18, what time they want to play. And so we get singles saying, I requested the morning and I got the afternoon, or I requested the afternoon and I got the morning. That's just a single issue, and it's really difficult. Chelsea, we've talked to Chelsea endlessly. That's just what they offer. They offer 2-8. So that's that one position. One thing I keep telling people, there's a member, and I won't throw his name out there. There's a member that has played 14 days out of 14 days this entire season, and he just understands the system pretty well, that he has a lot of points. And when he puts in for placement, everybody's putting in for 18 holes. Everybody wants a good 18-hole tee time. He knows he's got a lot of points, so he always puts in for 9 holes with his group. His group gets placed, and I get more phone calls about this one particular group. How are they getting preferential treatment? They're on the tee sheet every day. They recommend 9. They put in for 9 holes, so they get their 9 holes. Where every morning when the tee sheet's placed, there are some 9-hole spots untaken, and then once the members get their overflow email, they all scramble to fill in the 9-hole spots. So there are ways that people are doing it. As far as what times, it's so hard to say what time everybody wants. I mean, I always feel like everybody wants 8:30 in the morning, but based on people's commitment to who knows what it is. The one thing I would point out, though, is I know people are frustrated. Believe me, I'm spending half of every day of the last month talking to frustrated members. And, when I explain to them the state guidelines, a lot of times they don't realize what the state guidelines are. I get a chuckle myself because, Steve was saying you read the emails we send out. I always put a link in them to linking the state guidelines on mass.gov page, and our email administrator allows me what they call a heat map, so that you can go back and look at the email you send out and see where the members are clicking, what links they're clicking. I've never had a colder link that I put out there. Nobody's clicking on the state guidelines. Nobody cares. They only care about how this compares to what it used to be, and how it compares to Bayberry, and how it compares to Dennis. And so, I really think, once again, we're following the guidelines. Last Friday, everything changed. We changed our hours of operation. We expanded them 3 hours. Tee times were dropped. We basically gained a tee time an hour. I really think things are going to settle in over the next week, and people's frustrations are at a really high point going into Friday. It'll probably take a week or two for their frustrations to lessen, but the data shows right now about the same amount of members are playing a day over the last few days as they have in the past. And once the points all kind of settle down, I think you're going to see things getting closer to normal, as close as they can be when we have 12-minute increments instead of 8.
And what was that date, Roman?
Last Friday was when we, so the date, what would that be, the 11th? The 12th, I think. That's the day that we expanded our hours to, basically all sunshine hours, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., and we changed the tee sheet to 12-minute increments.
And if it hasn't been asked, Roman, the expectation to go to 10 minutes, what timetable do you see that happening in?
Well, John just mentioned it, that, the word is out there that the end of the month, the 29th, is when there is an expectation that we may go down to 10-minute increments. That may be phase 3 or part 2 of phase 2, but there is an expectation that that's the date that they may lessen restrictions. The one thing that I would say to the committee too, and again, that I don't expect anybody to do anything with this other than this is my opinion. When we get down to 10-minute tea times, I may come to the committee and have the committee consider never going below it. I mean, I think that 10-minute increments are great increments. We could operate a golf course in a speedy manner, in a very, in a manner where we don't need to rush people through or constantly have to crack the whip and get, like we're getting cattle around. But 10 minutes is a really enjoyable way to play golf. So that's just a thought that's been in my mind. We would, in a normal year, we would have never been able to justify losing the revenue of backing up tea times. But now, because we have this new kind of reset, I would consider when we do get to 10 minutes, seriously looking at implementing a 10-minute increment going forward.
Roman, that's I think that's a great idea because the enjoyment of a round of golf with that kind of interval is so far superior to people being crowded into the intervals that we've put out there. I mean, in terms of enforcement and player satisfaction, I just think it's very difficult. So, entertaining other comments. Steve, I saw you, and then John and Martha, and I'll go right down the line. Steve?
Roman, if we can anticipate what the new updated guidelines will be from the state for part 2 of phase 2 or phase 3 on the 29th, what can we do in advance to be prepared so that if the governor announces them and says that these are effective on the 29th, we actually are ready to implement them on the 29th. Because I think one of the frustrations that some of the members had is while it was last Friday that we went to the phase 2, basically we could have gone to phase 2 as early as Monday. But
yeah, so I agree with Steve. I think that, based on what we've learned, what I've learned, I had a lot of restrictions placed on me on opening the golf course. We had to really have a lot of approvals to open the golf course. I didn't need as many for phase 2, and I think that, if I get the health director's approval in advance, we're good to go on phase 3. The only thing that would hold us back would be Governor Baker announcing at least 4 days in advance that we would go to 10-minute tee times so that I could update the tee sheets. Because, we operate for, I basically got the approval last Monday when it was official. And at that point, when you affect the tee sheets, I can't affect the tee sheets until the following Friday. So if he gives us the notice to say, say on whatever, I don't even have a calendar in front of me, but if it's on Wednesday for Monday, if he gives us that notice that we will be reducing to 10-minute tee times, I can get a quick approval and we can have those tee sheets ready for that Monday. A lot of the delay that occurred, again, there just wasn't a playbook for, here's how the town reacts from phase 1 to phase 2, and there were some days lost in the middle there. But I think we're going to be more ready for a phase 3 introduction. And right now, if you can, this is one of the things we're having operational difficulties with. We're booking tee times for the general public in June, July, August, September, and it's really hard to book public tee times when the tee sheets are going to change. And basically, when we change the tee sheets, everybody gets deleted off them. So it's a very bulky process when we're booking these public groups. So we always get in weekends of September or 4th of July. So it's all about the tee sheets. If I get if I get 4 days notice from the state, I'll get a quick approval and we'll have the tee sheets ready to go for that 29.
Cool.
Other comments? Because we're almost at 5 o'clock, people. I'd like to move on the discussion. If there aren't any more questions, so that we can get to our old business, if you will. John Wheeler, one last comment.
Must be
I just wanted to, at some point, I'd like to address the issue we've all heard about, and that is I'm not muted, I'm unmuted.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, at some point, I want to address the issue of what I'm hearing to be abuse of the employees in the pro shop by members and non-members relative to whatever. And how can we support what you're doing, Roman, to address that issue? Because obviously we all say that's unacceptable behavior.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I appreciate what you're saying. Absolutely. This has been a really frustrating time for golfers, for our staff. They've been very frustrated. We always have a manager on duty when we take the difficult phone calls. I've gotten so many difficult phone calls in the last month or so. Nothing has risen to the point of that I would consider a code of conduct violation. Whenever I do get those, I always contact Clem. We had one with a group of sweeps players in the spring, and I contacted Clem and I said, Clem, I've got a code of conduct violation. I'm going to contact these guys, ask them to formally apologize, and I normally try to handle things like that in an informal manner before taking it to the committee. But I always let Clem know in advance. We've had more general frustration, and our staff has put up with a lot, but it hasn't risen to anything that I would consider abuse or anything rising to the need to have a code of conduct violation. It's been close, and it's been a shame, John, that it's answering the phone has been tough duty. I mean, answering the phone has been tough duty, whether it's members, non-members. I try to encourage our staff all I can, and I try to have the staff listen when they transfer a phone call to me that's more difficult. I try to have the staff listen to how I handle it because different people. Unfortunately, our seasonal staff that answer the telephone don't usually have the background on what the policies are as deeply as I do. So once I can get somebody on the phone, I can explain it a little better. I can't have these seasonal staff going home and researching every golf committee meeting and every state regulation. We give them a basic script of what they're supposed to book tee times, and anything beyond that, pass it down the line to your manager on duty. But I appreciate what you're saying. It's been a really difficult time to work in the pro shop and answer the phones, but nothing that's been brought to my attention has reached the level of a code of conduct violation.
And Roman, I would just apprise the committee at large, if you want to reference our code of conduct policy, it's on our website. I don't know how many people have looked at our website recently, but that was one of the reasons why we, wanted to organize those policies and have them, in the public domain. Maybe we can just, put that out there as a cautionary, Roman, that people should be aware of what our code of conduct policy was or still is. And in fact, the last time that we actually implemented the total policy, it dealt with a pretty severe issue where an individual purposely was hitting a golf ball into members, and it was done in a purposeful, malicious way. And we had to go into executive session. It was very, very cumbersome, but we got resolution to the problem, and it's not like we have not acted in the past. And I feel very strongly, John Wheeler, that we certainly would not hesitate at all if we had to accede to an incident that was worthy of that kind of attention. So,
Clem, the strength of that policy gives me a lot of latitude to usually get a good outcome. Where I quote the policy. The policy is also on the Cranberry Valley website under member resources. And when members sign for their membership each year, they're signing that they agree with the policy. So they sign an agreement of that policy. Once we do have a situation, yes, Clem, I mean, it happens a few times a year. I always let you know that I'm handling something informally first before it has to reach the level of the committee. And we have been able to handle things ever since the situation you just mentioned in an informal manner of apologies.
Okay, great. Can we move on, people? I'd like to go to old business, if we could. Roman, would you take your screen sharing down?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I was going to
sorry, I didn't think it was so long.
It's okay.
How's that?
Oh, that's much. No, take it down.
Does that work?
No.
It almost worked. It went. That's it. Thank you.
No.
Okay.
Back again.
back again.
Roma, all you have to do, I think, is hit screen.
I'm on screen. That's what I got.
Well, it went away, and then you must have hit it. You must have double clicked it because it came back on.
There you go.
Okay.
I had to make you the presenter again. I guess it nominated me as the presenter, so I had to make you the presenter.
Okay. People, this is just a suggestion. Roman went, and I thought it was extraordinarily helpful to get a review of the winter and spring work. And what I suggest, so that we can move on to more timely topics, perhaps under new business, are there any specific questions regarding the winter and spring work that was done at the club? And that's item A in your packet under old business. The greens aeration, the tree contract work, and I had the opportunity, I twisted John Crook's arm to go with me. I'll tell you, the tree work, Roman, I thought was extraordinary based on what I'd seen way back in April. I don't know how Sean and those guys got done what they got done, to be blunt, because they're working on a skeleton crew and they've got equipment that's so old it's ready to die an unseemly death. So kudos to Sean.
Well, Clem, if I can interject, the only way that work got done the way it did was, by doing it in the first week of June, was by shutting down 9 holes at a time and giving the tree contractor full free reign. They went so fast, they got so much done, and we had the option whether to have them kind of dancing around golfers or to shut down a 9 to allow their tree crew to get the most bang for the buck. It was awesome. They got a lot done. There was a lot of tornado cleanup, a lot of hangers still out there, so it's a much safer golf course than that now. So I appreciate the comments. I agree with you totally. They got a ton done.
Yeah. Other comments on the winter work? John Crook. I saw your mic on. Jack Conley. Jack?
Yeah, I just have a question, Roman. What is SF? Is that a person? SF is pursuing a statement of work?
Sean Fernandez.
Sean Fernandez.
Okay.
So
okay, thank you.
I've been working on our, just so you guys know that, I've been working on the operational side of things in the COVID-19. I have been all in this phase of reopening of all of our facilities every minute of the day and dealing with the public. Sean has his assistant, Rob Donovan, running the maintenance crew, which I mentioned is a skeleton crew. Sean Fernandez is tackling our project. So he's informally our project manager. He can't be, professionally named the project manager because that can only be the town engineer. But he's running those projects with our town's procurement team, and those are all going to come to fruition during this golf season. The landscape project.
And what kind of a timetable do you see on that, Roman?
If I can, Clem, I think I'll be able to announce progress at the next golf committee meeting. He's currently working with Highway. They have a scope of work document in place, and they're going to pursue that on state contract, like immediately, like next week is my understanding of it. And then Sean Fernandez has ordered the plant materials for planting, and I think he's ordered the lighting as well that he's going to install, and with the irrigation. The final piece is going to be a bid to do the hardscapes, and that'll be the final piece. So we're not going to engage in that right away, but we do have the scope of work already drawn up for the hardscapes by Michael Curadosi, as you'll remember. So that scope of work is ready to go to bid when the timing's right.
Roman, under your document in phase 2, where you reference the installation of the lighting and the irrigation, could I make as strong a case as I can to include, because it's cost effective, and I think there are all kinds of implications here legally. I would like simultaneously video surveillance added to that parking lot, especially in compliance with the COVID parameters and protocols. I think a lot of a lot of issues go away by having video surveillance in place so that if there is an incident in the parking lot, individuals staying and congregating, sharing cocktails, whatever, that's not in compliance at all, I think that could be your best friend. So I just would humbly submit that as a comment.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point, Clem. I believe that is in the project plan. So that would be security cameras off the car barn, and we'd have to await the electrical connection there. I think we're going to need Wi-Fi to the car barn in order to support security at the car barn, but that is in the plan.
Any comments from the other committeemen? I mean,
What is SOW?
What's that?
What is
sorry,
SOW?
John, that's the scope of work document that has to go out to the bidders and vendors.
I thought that was all done.
Yep, so that's what I said. So you're looking at the scope of work prepared by Michael Caradosi will go out at final bid phase. That is complete.
In terms of the paving in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, do we have a timetable on each one of those in terms of completion?
At this point, I don't, John. I just mentioned, I think the paving is gonna, it's in the works right now. So I think at next committee meeting, I think I'll be able to report on some work being done there. I know Sean has the scope of work that he's been working on with the highway department, and they're going out to bid with a state contractor. But at this point, I don't have a timetable other than to say it should be progress by the next golf committee meeting.
Okay.
The other question would be on the landscaping. Would that be done by possibly done by the time we have the state tournament up here?
Absolutely, that's the plan. So I think we're planning on having that done in the next, I'd say next month, John.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure, though. The one part of that I'm not sure about would be the hardscapes, and we'll try hard to get the hardscapes done. The plan is to have basically the phase 1 and 2 of that going concurrently, the paving and the landscaping, and then for the final part to fit in the hardscapes once we've got the final project on the paving and the landscaping.
And I guess the other question I have is, the solar farm is going to go in that little hole behind the maintenance barn, correct? Up in that hill? Now,
Yeah.
do we have a landscaping plan around the solar farm?
So, I think you've seen the plan in the past, John. It's been a little while. They presented a plan to the planning board where they're going to have a fenced-in area around their solar farm. What we do have a landscape plan for is along the edge of the parking lot. So we have, I think, arborvitaes or that are going to, well, basically a hedge wall that's going to block out the maintenance facility and the solar farm from site. So it's our parking lot landscape plan. The reason that part of it is on pause is they need to bring the electric line up right along that line. So that's why we've paused on that part of the landscape plan. Is we're waiting for the all the electric lines to be trenched.
Okay.
Okay, folks, if we could move on to the capital project timetable. I think I'd take the same approach here. It's pretty straightforward. And I'd also, Roman, I've been looking forward to this. If I screen share, I took this picture, folks, the other day, and it was one thing in particular that I thought was terrific that Sean had done. And I had an opportunity to sit down with him for a few minutes. And in particular, as budgeted, Sean's project for this placement of the tank came in at about $5,000 less than was budgeted. So it's in place, and Roman, correct, it's ready to be inspected.
It's not quite ready to be inspected yet. It has been placed on the pad. There's a few steps that we need to put a ballast around it, and there's a few other steps that have to occur, Clem. And if you'll notice, it's got an extension cord that has it receiving power right now. It's going to be hardwired. So it's not ready for inspection quite yet, but it is in operation, and it's ready for operation. So, excuse me. So, about that. So it's big progress. And yes, you mentioned Clem under budget. I mean, I think it's, again, this project has faced a lot of delays, and this COVID situation has delayed it even more. It remains on budget, which is a big part. So we're still looking at completing every aspect of this project on budget. The last aspect of it, reskinning the maintenance of the building, we need more money for that. So we're hoping to stay on budget in order to accomplish what we want to with that last phase.
Okay, great. Jack Harlan.
Robin, I realize you've been extremely busy dealing with this COVID stuff, but I think last year I'm looking at your status, and it says after interconnection, the charger grid bid. Didn't we determine that can go on independent of the solar installation? That doesn't have to wait, doesn't have to be serial?
Oh yeah, I think that was the case, Jack, and we've had, officially our project manager is the town engineer. He determined in speaking with the solar vendor that it would be better to have the solar infrastructure in place so that they would not have to design the charger grid and have nothing to plug it into. So his idea, which made a lot of sense to me, and Sean agreed with it as well, was let's get the solar installation done so that when we do bring in the electrician to do the charger grid, they'll be able to actually connect it and not have empty connections.
Okay.
John.
I just want to say, Roman, when you're ready, we're ready to help you with that, with the car change out. So just let us know.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to that. And, just so you know, John, I'm still, I have not moved whatsoever from what we were originally thinking as far as our cart needs. I think, the current landscape in town, the town has declared FY21 to be a financial emergency. The town's expecting to be $4 million under, and this and that. So I think procurement is going to be very difficult. So what I hope to do, John, is really, in my thinking, is we've got to tie in that golf cart lease with an increase in rates for carts in order to justify. We're currently renting a 7-year-old fleet of golf carts. We're getting so much money for these. The town is making so much profit on these carts, and when we bring in the carts we want to bring in, it's going to be a lot less profit. So I think we need to work on the rates and fees to help make up that difference to sell the town on a new lease. For why are we going to basically lose this gravy train that we currently have?
Got it. Okay.
John Crook, a comment?
No comment.
Okay. Excellent. I love that point that you made, Roman, about the project being on budget. Very, very important. So we now turn to new business. And again, I'd humbly suggest in the review of the phase 1 protocols, I guess what I had in mind was the fact that, Roman, I appreciate all the work of listening what was done. And I guess my question would simply be, in your humble opinion, what worked, what didn't? Do you have any observations that, might help us the next time around?
Yeah, so I can, one person that's been wonderful, and I know you can all share this with me, is I had a couple conversations with Tom Johnson, and he's got such wonderful perspective on things. And he said, document everything. This is such a unique point in time, and you should really evaluate what steps were taken and what worked and what didn't work. So, I appreciated Tom's perspective on that. We're stepping back and really taking the outside look. I think a couple things I can let the committee know about, and And, some things that have really worked for us. And again, I'll if you don't mind, Clem, I'll kind of mesh the phases, phase 1 and phase 2, just for, where we currently are.
Sure.
The town administrator absolutely nailed it when he wanted us to open with a gate person. I don't think any other golf course is doing that. It's the only way that we can ensure everybody entering our property knows the rules, knows where they're going. I think the gate person is absolutely wonderful. It's critical to what we're currently doing, and it's a reimbursable position. We're not paying a cent for it. It's reimbursable under FEMA. So the extra rangers you see on the golf course, and even now, I just this afternoon got word that our remote kiosk is what the state's calling it, with our remote payment system in the starter house. That position, the second ranger, and the gate person are all being reimbursed for the entire calendar year by FEMA. So we're not having to support those out of our budget.
I think that's certainly good news. And do I understand this correctly? Under the CARES Act, because of our attention to detail and the due diligence of everyone involved, the town stands to gain $2 million or more as a result of our attention to detail. Is that correct?
That's true, and again, I'm not involved in these high-level meetings, Clem. But in my meetings with the town administrator, he's made it crystal clear to me that I don't care what these other golf courses are doing. There's a lot of CARES Act money and FEMA money attached to following the rules, and so we're going to follow the rules, because instead of chasing a couple range buckets and cart charges, there's bigger money involved, and he was pretty clear there's higher purpose involved, our social responsibility to do the right thing, but also there is a lot of money involved in compliance.
I think that helps to explain to the general community within all the Harwiches that that's why we're doing what we're doing. Not to oversimplify it. Other comments, Jack? Your mic is on. No.
No, I'm sorry. No.
John Crook.
I have no comments.
Okay. Regarding, it's a good segue, Roman, into the second phase protocols. I guess I'd apply the same kind of mindset to that. What's your feeling about phase 2?
Yeah, so like I said, and again, as I was responding to one of Steve's comments before, we may have stumbled going from phase 1 to phase 2 for a few days based on not exactly having the playbook for who needs to approve what. And I was sending proposals up the line that were not being approved and that were being stalled on. I think we're ready to jump on phase 3 when it comes out. I think phase 2 is really a lot closer to normal. The numbers say it. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got 270 tee times available per day currently. That's a lot of tee times. We're able to satisfy a lot of folks. I think one thing that the committee can possibly help with going forward is, the committee was very helpful in endorsing the idea of being members only when we were stuck with the 15-minute increments. I had to crunch a lot of numbers and talk to the finance director and really get a lot of guidance that, this current 70-30 distribution is really a good idea, because we're giving the members now basically what they had previously and selling less tee times to the public. So the public are getting less, but the members are getting closer to the same that they used to have based on the current distribution. Moving forward, how we kind of swing that line there, because at some point we're going to be way down in green fees. So at some point when we start counting the money at the end of the year and counting what we're supposed to make compared to previous years, we're down on green fees, and I'm hoping at some point we'll start being up on member satisfaction, because we're giving more tee times. But that's a balance. That's always a delicate balance. Is what's the proper amount to give and what's the proper amount to sell. So I think we're kind of in a sweet spot. I think my evaluation will be we handled that just right. When the tee times were so limited, they had to be members only. And at this point now that we're so much closer to normal, and we're able to offer a lot more tee times, I'd take your advice and find out what the committee really thinks. But I think a 70-30 split of the 18-hole tee times. Again, it says on the sheet there the members have 100% access to all the 9-hole times, which are about almost 60 tee times when you count the twilight times and the morning times. I throw it back at you, Clem. What's the committee's thought on the distribution of tee times? Because that's always a hot topic.
I think it's more than appropriate. Because the bottom line is, at some point in time, revenue is going to be looked at, I am sure, by the selectmen, and regardless of what's been said emotionally, in the mix of things, the bottom line is always the dollar. Steve, you ready? Your hand up? Steve?
Yes, I had mute. And this question may be moot because it may be that I don't understand the T sheet system as well as I should. But do we have a functionality, Roman, to have? I know we have member tee times and then we have general public tee times. Do we have a function to have a group of member tee times, but only if they bring a guest, a paying guest?
No, we don't currently have that. Basically, the policy is members can make a request with one guest. So a member like yourself, you can make a request with one guest in a member tee time. If you wanted to bring more than one member, you would now be you'd basically be treated as the general public, and you'd be reserving a non-member tee time. But there is no special block of times for members with guests.
Do you think that's an option that we could look at? I'm just thinking that that way you get at least some member satisfaction because he or she can get a tee time, but you also get some revenue generation by saying, this block, in particular, a block, maybe even if it's restricted just to weekends, is for members to get to play, but only if they're bringing a paying guest, because we need to generate revenue to help offset the cost of memberships by getting general public revenue.
I think I'd have to look into the system. I think we're fairly limited on that, Steve. What we can do with this current system, I'll let the cat out of the bag. And I forgot to mention something a little earlier, but we've maybe come to an end with the Chelsea system. They're really not doing a good job for us as far as support. The company's been recently sold, and the previous owner of the company left the company. We're interviewing and researching new companies. The fact that our golf course relies so heavily on the lottery system dictates everything. It really negates a lot of the companies that are out there that offer this system, or this type of system, and it's so cultural at Cranberry Valley. We need a lottery system or a priority-based system. So we're doing a little research with those. One company that does offer it is Golf Now, and we're still in contractual negotiations, which is awful. Months and months later, I thought when this COVID crisis hit, I was so far ahead of the game by having these companies all vetted and ready to enter into an agreement. And our town lawyers have really thrown some cold water on that deal, where they just cannot accept Golf Now's contract. And Golf Now, I don't want to speak for them. This is basically a $9,500 deal. It's small potatoes for them. This is the company that owns Disney and NBC Sports. These are the lawyers we're dealing with. So we're at a legal standstill. The reason I mentioned that is I was hoping we'd get a taste of Golf Now this season, and then go into this off season with a good idea of how that company works and how that company is to deal with. Because if we went with an RFP for what I'm hoping will be a fully integrated system next year that does both email marketing, website administration, and tee time management, they offer all of those, including a lottery system. So, I'm really still hopeful that we get our feet wet with Golf Now in order to be able to, enter that domain, not inexperienced. But sorry, that's a long way around your question. That Chelsea, we're running into a lot of dead ends with them. And when we ask them to basically design us a new function, they don't have that ability. We're kind of, like I told you, with singles. They got two ways to deal with them, and that's what we've got. We've got two ways. We're not designing anything different.
Roman, I want to interject simply this, because it's such an important point. I want everyone to understand in a very clear way, you had positioned this Golf Now opportunity back in March, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And the fact is the town legal has weighed in and prevented that from happening, correct?
The situation is we vetted them in a procurement situation with our town procurement team. The town procurement team accepted my recommendation on Golf Now being the selected vendor, so we entered into a contractual negotiation. That includes, so the town's procurement team then engages the town's legal department to say, let's write up a contract. Golf Now sent their contract, and in my discussions with the town administrator, this is very easy. The town has its contract, and we take the Golf Now contract and make it attachment A on our contract, and basically in any disputes, the town wins. And so, so that was going to move forward. The town's legal department had such problems with the Golf Now contract, they've denied their contract entirely. And so I've been asked to send Golf Now our contract and say, no, you must sign our town's contract. And I'm in daily communication with their sales rep saying, can you get me some feedback? What do you need from your contract in ours? Help me build an all-inclusive contract. And I'm getting nothing. I mean, once again, these are the NBC Sports and Disney lawyers, and this is a $9,500 deal. And they're not, if we're not willing to sign their contract, they may not give us anything else. So that's the frustrating point where it stands is our town lawyer denies their contract.
I think, I think it's doubly frustrating for us as a committee because although I don't know the specifics, Golf Now has contracted with thousands and thousands of golf operations across the entire United States. What is so unusual about Harwich? I don't understand that.
They might step in this negotiation. Our town's lawyer said they needed to register as a vendor with the state of Massachusetts, and they said, "Gosh, we're already all over the state." So they've actually invested some money, and they went out of their way to apply for the proper approvals that the town wanted them to apply for that no other vendors or no other courses were requiring. I don't know. I'm frustrated on that one because I thought, when this crisis hit and we were ahead of the game with this, I thought, man, when we get a chance to reopen, we've nailed it. We've got remote payment in place. Basically every non-member tee time could be directed through Golf Now, and payment would just go into our bank account. We wouldn't need to see a single golfer. They'd show up on our property having already paid. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating. I've hit a brick wall with that one.
Yeah, it's important to pursue because I think the benefits are so extraordinary. It's just hard to believe that we're in limbo.
I got a question, Clem.
John, yes.
Just so maybe I'm confused on this, but I mean, I remember having a discussion about Golf Now about a year ago. And at that time, we decided not to get involved with it because with Golf Now, we did not get the revenue that we would if we was to sell a green fee off the street. I mean, it's a discounted fee. But now what I'm hearing is that Golf Now can also do whatever the Chelsea system can do, in addition to sending non-rent greens fees to Cranberry Valley. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, John, the thing you're mentioning is we were looking into using Golf Now just to, I think it was 2 years ago or so, to bring a new population to Cranberry Valley because they do have a different demographic. It's a different demographic that uses Golf Now for the most part. So we were hopeful it would introduce some new customers, and we were going to look at it for just a small window of time. Say 2 days out from the day of play, we would offer the tee times to Golf Now to sell once we've already had a shot through our own resource to sell it. So back to the Chelsea idea, Golf Now over this past winter purchased a company called Links. What's it called? They purchased an existing company that has sheet management, that has basically a Chelsea point system. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if they stole it. I mean, I've seen it. I've had it demoed for me. It's basically the exact Chelsea system, just a lot more modern looking. And it's part of this fully integrated system of marketing, email marketing, T-sheet management. So the current deal that we looked to enter into, John, was because we were anticipating the need for contactless payment going into this year. And so that's why we wanted to engage Golf Now specifically for this season, was knowing that there was going to be a requirement for contactless payment. And so this was a very limited deal. Normally, Golf Now and a lot of those companies try to do trade times, where you give them a certain amount of tee times and they're allowed to discount them and sell them to make their money. Our town balked at the idea of valuing them that way. So we worked out a $9,500 percentage of the tee times. I think they would get 20% of the tee time sold up to a cap of 9,500 is the current deal. And so that was just to get our feet wet with Golf Now and offer this contactless payment option, which is so important right now. The state guidance is not requiring it, but it's recommending it at this point. If we did any business before last week, it would have been required. Contactless payment is required. And, you know, if we're the golf course that's requiring people to call on the phone and give all their credit card digits and all that stuff, then, I mean, I'm sure you guys that have heard the complaints of the members, one of the greatest complaints we're hearing is you can't get through on the telephone. It's because we're doing all these long transactions on the telephone with digits and you know, date of birth and all that stuff. So anyway, that's the background to Golf Now. Is we were hoping for a contactless payment option for this particular circumstance.
Jack Conley.
Roman, why can't you find out from the town lawyers what the exact conflicts are that they don't like?
It's something that I'm working on daily, Jack, and they just won't tell. I mean, I've asked that direct question. They won't tell me. It's just the contract as a whole. It does not fit, you know, their needs. I don't know how to say it. They've said they want me to put it on Golf Now to tell us what do they need in the contract.
Wow. I mean, they work for the town, right? They're not an independent entity, right?
Oh, they're not town employees. They're contracted by the town. It's KP Law that's contracted by the town.
But they're still working on behalf of the town. It would seem like, I mean, can you not leverage the town administrator to? It would seem like you somehow, if you don't know what's wrong with the contract, how are you going to address it?
So, Jack, this is evolving daily, and I don't think I'm speaking out of confidence here. I leveraged the town finance director, who is, you know, very directly interested in this Golf Now. She's been hounding me to get this done because she's counting the revenue and seeing the revenue missing, and she was in such support of this Golf Now agreement. I asked her to please do everything she could do, and she just got back to me today and said, you know, we must follow the legal advice. So I'm in daily contact with their sales rep saying, tell us what you need. Let's make this contract work. And this could be a frustrating situation that gets resolved tomorrow or the next day, because I know the sales rep's working hard on our behalf. It's frustrating to have, be one of the middlemen. I wish the two lawyers would just call each other and hash it out. But it's something I'm working on daily, and I'm hoping to have some progress on it in the next few days. It was ready to go we worked on it in March. I'd say it was ready to go in April. I don't have the dates. I think I presented it to you guys last meeting. It's been a few months, and it should have been in place by now.
Wow, that's tough.
It certainly is frustrating. Any other comments? Okay, I'd like to move on to it's the last item on the agenda. And unfortunately, Selectman McManus is not present. I had reached out to our liaison simply because I thought it would be more than appropriate to have someone speak with authority as to what the role of the golf committee is as defined in the town charter, et cetera. And we've had some correspondence from Steve Bellata and John Crook. And with 20 minutes to go, gentlemen, I want to be fair to everybody. And if we have to table, or defer to our next meeting, so be it. But I think it's important, both on the website of the town as well as the golf committee website, there is very specific language as far as what the committee's charge is and what our responsibilities are. And I was glad that Roman provided that under section 13 of the golf committee. I don't know if you printed copies out, but there is some very specific language. And I think to take heart, Steve, some of the points you raised in your communication to the committee, might be blended into or accommodated by. And specifically, I go to 713.3 and reading as such, the director of golf operations or employee having the general powers of supervision of the golf course shall be under the day-to-day supervision of the town administrator. Within the scope, and this is the important thing, within the scope of the general policy and direction established by the golf committee. And it's one person's opinion, but to date, including the changes in the charter, I think our role has been very productive and positive. In essence, this committee is regarded as one of the most successful town committees, within that a group of some 50-odd committees that do exist within the town. So with that in mind, and again, I would counsel everyone to look back at our website where you can find actual, wording. And I don't think there's any ambiguity. It would have been helpful to have some guidance from Mr. McManus, but as such, since it isn't here, I would ask you to go to the document submitted as a draft by Steve Bellata of the Golf Committee Charter Addendum. And John, I don't want to cut you off. You had a comment. John Wheeler.
Okay. I printed out the from the charter page, okay, as well as from the website, and there's inconsistent language here between the two. For example, it talks on the town website about it says in a third sentence, according to the town charter, this charge is strictly defined as a policy-making entity with oversight of the day-to-day operations of the Cranberry Valley Golf Course operation. I have no idea what the word with oversight of the day-to-day operations. I have no idea what that means, other than to think that is inconsistent with what I'm reading off the charter. Because we don't have oversight.
Okay. Point well taken. That's why it would be helpful to have answers to that specific question. And, I'm just suggesting too that, that there is a charter commission, et cetera. This is going to be a long, involved process if we're choosing to look at all these nuances and inconsistencies. So, there may be a way forward. In deference to, what was submitted, and John, I definitely want to get to your document as well, too. But Steve, you submitted your document. Would you like to take the lead on this? You've expressed verbally a lot of these ideas, and I had a few questions that I wanted to pose too as well. So go ahead if you would.
Excuse me. Yes, I mean, I clearly there's a general theme here that I'm suggesting, and again, just one man's opinion.
Yeah.
Which is, I believe we should be more involved in the day-to-day operations of the golf course as a golf committee. I think that we should provide more transparency to the taxpaying public and to the member, the membership of the course, so that when we have these meetings and we make recommendations, or Roman makes recommendations, and we follow the parliamentary procedures like we did, and we vote, we should say, okay, this is a recommendation from the director of golf. Here's the committee vote, and if it needs to go to the town administrator for approval or any other town department, we should publish a report that it's gone to that town department, whether or not they've approved it or not approved it, and if so, why, the time it takes. The same thing with anything that needs to go to the selectmen, and we should publish that report on a regular basis that shows here's the 6 recommendations that the director of golf made. All 6 were endorsed, I'm just using an example, by the golf committee, and it went to the TA who he or she approved it, and then it went to the Board of Selectmen, and oh, by the way, here's the Board of Selectmen's votes. We should publish that so the world knows that. Why isn't this happening at the golf course? Geez, I don't know. The director of golf wanted to do it, the golf committee endorsed it, and the selectmen voted it down. And this is the reason why they gave for voting it down. So if you have a problem, you have a forum to go to your selectmen and say, hey, why did you vote this down? The other big piece of it is when we have a crisis. And, we've had 2 in the last year with the tornado and the virus. And following normal town politics and procedure during a crisis just makes no business sense at all. In my mind. I mean, when you have a crisis, you need immediate action. You can't deal with bureaucratic delays and 7 different groups of people trying to decide what you're going to do. What you need to do is get things done immediately under some overall guidelines. And clearly one of the guidelines, and this sort of ties in with John Crook's memo as well, clearly under the guidelines of whether or not it makes common business sense. I mean, to invest $2,000 to generate $5,000 in a week's time is just a no-brainer. From a business standpoint, you should just be able to do it. Don't get permission. Don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness afterwards. Just do it and then say, geez, what did I do that was wrong? I spent $2,000. I brought in $5,200. It was a better situation for everybody involved. And oh, by the way, the town made money. So if you have a problem with that, explain to me why. But we can't go normal business process during a crisis. Any good crisis manager will tell you that when you hit a crisis situation, you take the normal operating book and you put it away and you go to your crisis management book, which is, okay, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be different than normal. And I tried to define what I would consider a crisis just by putting some metrics in, which again, we know what Roman clearly knows and keeps very good track of what the typical normal revenue is at the golf course on a given week and a given time of year. If that's going to be affected by 10% or more, then we're in crisis mode. And if we're in crisis mode, then we follow the crisis book. And there's no reason in the world not to leverage this august group of people on the committee to help dealing with the crisis. I know the town has a million other priorities, but to not utilize this experienced group of people to help deal with the crisis, it's just silly in my opinion. So that's the major thrust of charter changes I would like to see.
Yeah, it's certainly appreciated. It starts a very, I think, a valuable conversation. And Steve, specifically, and other people certainly weigh in. As I see it, Steve, there are really 3 issues that you're considering, and obviously we're not going to resolve this tonight. So I would challenge you to refine a transparency strategy, that would be one thing. A crisis management strategy, which I talked about, prior when we had the
I think the rest
tornado.
of them, but no, I'm not going to do any more on it until we get some support and some sign of support from either the TA or our liaison, because all of this is moot. I mean, they are the people who control the decision-making process. They are the people that define the policy on how much one can spend without going through other approvals, et cetera, again, to John Crook's memo. They are the ones who held things up on the golf now and said you have to follow the advice of legal. They're the ones that control everything, and they seem to have no interest whatsoever in talking to us or coming to our meeting and treating us like a serious player involved in doing this. I mean, the liaison was supposed to be here, and the liaison isn't here. So I don't think they have any real interest in doing it. So why? I don't want to do the paperwork just to do the paperwork.
Okay. John Wheeler, I just want to try to get comments in so that we can move to John's. Steve, one last thing. After we get these comments, would you be comfortable for moving the discussion again to our next meeting, or you would rather see a response from the town?
Yeah, I would like to see some response from the town to see if they're willing to at least engage us in dialogue on how we can add more value as a committee through a potential charter change.
Okay, point well taken, John Wheeler. I saw your mic on.
Oh, it is on. I didn't realize. Okay. I would endorse the notion of that Steve has raised to get some feedback, because I don't want to waste time talking. Okay. And when was the last time we saw a liaison at one of these meetings? Never, since I've been on. Never. So we got to have some acknowledgement of our credibility.
Okay.
So,
Jack.
Yeah, I think Steve's recommendations make a lot of sense, but just the Golf Now example to me says the town's not ready to deal with a crisis issue. I mean, they want to go there, they've got a series of steps that they want to go through, and it's almost irrespective of the situation to deal with, if it's a crisis, they're not acting like it's a crisis. They're acting like it's everyday business, and, we'll go through a normal procurement process and take 3 months to get it done. They don't seem like there's an initiative to expedite anything or put some accountability and responsibility with resources.
A sense of urgency.
Yeah, there isn't any. And the fact that, I don't know Mr. McManus, but the fact that he hasn't come, sort of says what the town thinks of our efforts as a committee.
Well, it's unfortunate. John, you had your mic on, John Crook.
Yeah, I think Steve brings up some good points. I think the big thing is the sense of urgency and transparency in terms of it's very difficult for municipal government to make timely decisions. That's the problem. And I think that's what frustrates us all in terms of how do you make more quicker decisions in a world where we're basically running a business? I mean, Cranberry Valley is a business. And you have to make decisions on a timely basis to really make that thing happen. And I think that's the frustrating part. So I always looked upon our role in the golf committee as being, I don't want to get down into the nitty gritty in terms of what makes the golf committee, Cranberry Valley go. That's what Roman's for. I mean, that's why we have a director of golf. And that's why we give him the responsibility to make those decisions. I think our role is basically to be looking at the big picture a little bit in terms of how we can frame things that we feel can raise the bar at Cranberry Valley, along with the cooperation of the director of golf and his staff. So that's kind of how I look at it. But I think the frustrating part that we deal with is how to deal with selectmen and town administrators on a timely basis. And I'm sure that's very frustrating for Roman too, because I mean, it's very difficult to get things done quickly.
And that's, a really good segue into your letter that I'm referencing. I have it in front of me, to the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator. John, if because we're running short on time and I don't want to bum rush this, could you just summarize, basically the spirit or, philosophy behind the letter that you wrote?
Well, I think
what action you would like us to take?
I think the whole purpose of it, we started talking about this a little bit at the last meeting, but I think the general direction was, how do we give Roman more spending parameters in terms of getting things done? Because if I'm listening to the information that we had last meeting, anything over $1,000 has to get approved by the town administrator or the Board of Selectmen.
Roman, is that true?
So that was the emergency procedures put in for the COVID crisis, and that is true. They required us to submit for a purchase order in advance for any purchase over $1,000 and get the finance director's approval. That was on the discussion last night with the selectmen, and I have not had a chance to watch that meeting yet, and I haven't heard a recap of that meeting, but they were looking at rescinding that restriction as well as the hiring restrictions. So I'm not sure what the outcome of that is. I have a department head meeting tomorrow where I'm sure they'll go over it.
Well, everyone's had a chance to look at, John's memo, and I'm seeking direction from you as a committee. What would be your disposition as far as the points that John has raised here? I think 99% of them certainly are valid. Jack Conley?
Yeah, I think John's similar in nature to Steve's. I guess one of the times in the past that I think we've discussed, and I'm not sure I'm completely clear of the terminology, but I think some of the towns run the golf course as an enterprise fund or something like that, where it's self-sufficient.
Yeah.
If we were to operate in that mode, would that give this entity any more autonomous or any more ability to enact decisions or take action without having to go to the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator? I'm not suggesting we become rogue and go do what we want, but if you're operating under parameters where you need to recover your resources or your expenses.
Well, I can answer that directly because the question's come up numerous times. The enterprise fund, when you take the water department, for example, is a wonderful concept. People need water.